I'm Rev Bonnie. I'm the community spiritual leader here, and I am so grateful to start this month off again with our new topic, Peace, Poise, and Power. Now, it might seem a little strange. Oh, I was talking into that instead of this one. It might seem a little strange to hear those words, peace, poise, and power all together. And I think we might see peace and poise coming together, but power? And that word power, it really depends on how we are defining it, or what comes to mind when we think of power. If we're thinking about power over, forcefulness, aggression, that's different than the way that we are talking about power here at the center. Ernest Holmes has a definition in his glossary in the back of the Science of Mind textbook. Power is the energy by which everything lives. And his definition of power is about a paragraph long, and he concludes with there is neither competition nor monopoly when we're talking about power. So we're talking about that inner power, that place that we find our powerful sense of self. And then the word poise. I was actually surprised because I'm more familiar with the second definition of the word poise. The first definition of the word poise is a state of balance or equilibrium. The second definition, a dignified, self-confident manner or composure. And the third definition is steadfastness and stability. And so I was seeing poise as the way that we approach a situation. It's that sense of balance that we approach any situation that we need to be involved in the world. In August, we did a question and answer Sunday. And there were still some questions that I had not addressed on that Sunday. There are 4 of them that I've combined together, and I am going to be looking at today as we think about peace, poise, and power. But I'd like to read you the questions. First of all, as we have started the political road to electing a new president, etc., what does Ernest Holmes advise about involving ourselves in worldly issues when at times they appear to be out of alignment with our religious science principles? Second question, how does one deal with divisive political issues in one's spiritual practice? Another one, it is difficult for me to understand that the people who are not making the target, and last month we talked about hitting the target as the word for sin being when you're not hitting the target. That's where that word comes from in archery. So the people who are not making the target and are doing killings, rapings, and thefts are part of the one and part of me. How do I deal with this in my thinking? And the last question, how do we find the divine nature in horrific events that take place in our world? So all 4 of those questions, I think, can be summed up by saying, how do we find our peaceful, poised, and powerful center in the midst of external challenges or things that appear challenging to us? How do we find those places within us? And what does Ernest Holmes suggest that we do about that? What does he have to say about it? Well, first of all, I'm going to put in a plug for next month's Science of Mind magazine that has already come out. This is October 2015. This whole magazine is answering that question in a lot of different perspectives. And so I encourage you, if you don't get this as a subscription, we do sell it in the bookstore. This one is really full of all kinds of amazing things. So I want to read to you from here. This is, they take something from Ernest Holmes in every one of these magazines, and this is from Ernest Holmes' book, How to Change Your Life. And he's talking about your inherent power, the power of directive emotions. And he says, every privilege brings its corresponding responsibility, the right and power to make our own decisions, bad ones or good ones, put you in a very sensitive position. You now realize you are no longer an automaton, moved about by the caprice of circumstances, solely guided by instincts or subject to some will superimposed upon you. You are free to choose. You have to take the consequences of choosing. And then he talks about how the universal mind works. And he concludes here, everything is according to law. What you are deeply feeling is usually what you are establishing in mind of cause. It is the pattern for what you will receive. What you are deeply feeling is the pattern for what you will receive. So what determines how we're feeling in any given situation? Usually I think that what creates our feelings is what we're thinking about the situation, what we're telling ourselves about that situation. So if we're looking at a group of people or a person that we're interacting with, and we're telling ourselves that that person is out to get us, that person doesn't like us, that is what is going to create our feelings in that situation. If we look at somebody or some group of people and we tell ourselves, that person has my best intention in mind, or has the best intention for the whole in mind, how we feel is going to be different. If we're telling ourselves, I'm safe, we're going to feel different than if we're telling ourselves we are not safe. So a lot of it has to do with our thinking in regard to that situation or those people. An example is, how many of you have ever been in a huge hotel where you have to take an elevator up lots and lots of floors? Anybody? What's missing in those hotels usually in the elevator? 13th floor, yes. And they don't put the 13th floor in because people are afraid to stay on the 13th floor. Now, do they build the hotel and create the 13th floor and then program the elevator to bypass it so you can get onto the 14th floor? No. What they've done is just renamed the 13th floor the 14th floor, and everybody feels better about staying there. Now, isn't that a good example of how our mind works? What do we tell ourselves about the number 13? What do we tell ourselves about staying on the 13th floor? What are we telling ourselves about what's going on in the world around us? A lot of it has to do with what's coming up in our minds. Recently, in the last week or so, there's been a woman who's been in the media named Kimberly Davis. And she is someone who, because of her deep convictions, chose not to give out marriage licenses in a county in Kentucky because she believed that it is not okay for people of the same sex to get married, and the Supreme Court decided it was okay. So she decided to stick by her conviction. She was not going to give out marriage licenses to anybody. You might also know that she's now in jail for that decision. Now, just bringing up her name, I can see, I think many of you have an opinion about her. You might have an opinion about what she did or didn't do. So you've told yourself something about her. You might have told yourself that she's hateful and bigoted. You might have told yourself that she's a martyr in doing God's will. You might have told yourself that she is a victim of evangelical Christian brainwashing. You might have told yourself she deserves to be jailed or she doesn't deserve to be jailed. You might have told yourself that she should do her job regardless, or that she's strong for standing by her convictions. The question that we have raised here today is, what do we teach? What do we teach in religious science? What does Ernest Holmes teach? And Ernest Holmes teaches, no matter what your opinion or what you tell yourself about someone like her or whatever else is going on in the news, we are all one. We are all made of the same God stuff, regardless of our opinions. And what we teach is that no matter what our opinion or our belief, there is something greater than the rightness or wrongness of someone's behavior or their beliefs or their thinking, or our beliefs and our opinions. There's something bigger out there. The question then is, how do we tap into it? We are actually, no matter what our opinion, one with all those who have been doing shootings recently and all those who have been shot recently, regardless of the race of the shooter or the victim. We are all one with Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton, Sarah Palin, Bernie Sanders, and our President Obama. Now, our minds are powerful, and I believe that just mentioning these things and these names have created emotional reactions inside of people, one way or the other. We have an emotional response based on what we've told ourselves about all of those people or those situations. And remember that what we believe is that what you are deeply feeling is usually what you are establishing in the mind of cause. It is the pattern for what you will receive. Think about that. What we're feeling that's being invoked by the names and the situations, no matter what they are, that feeling is what's going into the mind of cause and creating more of what we are going to receive. So do we want to be part of healing the situation, or do we want to add to the problem that's out there? Take a deep breath. Take a deep breath, everybody. Yeah. The question has been, how do we deal with this, and how do we find our peaceful, poised, and powerful center as we see all of this going on around us? Again, a deep breath. I believe it starts there, reminding ourselves to take that deep breath. And so what I'm going to share with you now is the process that I take myself through when something that's out there is triggering something in here and I'm having an emotional reaction to it. So the first thing I do is examine, what am I telling myself about that situation or that person? And am I feeling fear or anger? And I believe anger is based on a fear somewhere. So I look at that. Where is that fear coming from? Am I feeling separate in some way? Now, sometimes I find myself actually going back to that old idea of God as something separate from me that's sort of running the puppet strings, and why doesn't he do something about this situation? And I have to bring myself back because I realize I'm moving into separation. I'm forgetting that that God is moving in and through me, and it's not a person out there controlling everything. It's a state of being within myself. Or I might be feeling separate from somebody that I'm dealing with. And I realize again that that separation is part of what's creating the angst that I'm experiencing. And so I take myself through looking at what exactly am I telling myself in this situation. And I encourage you, if you want to choose to do this practice, to do it as free of self-judgment as you possibly can, because that doesn't serve us. We just look because we're trying to get at the root of what's going on. And once we do that, then I move myself into reminding myself of my spiritual truth, which is that we are all one. So what does that mean? Through that oneness, I believe that every person that pushes a button in me is also a mirror for me to look within at where it is within me something similar resides. Now, that can be difficult because we want to go, I'm not like that. I don't blah, 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 blah. You know, we want to defend ourselves to ourselves. The key to this working is to take the time to honestly look, where is there something within me that this is holding a mirror up to? So recently, I've asked myself, is there something that I believe in so strongly that I would be willing to risk my job and go to jail for it? Is there something the government could ask me to do that I would believe was so wrong that I would risk my job and go to jail for it? And I've asked myself, are there ways that I play the martyr and the victim? I actually asked our board that at our last meeting because our board members put in a lot of hours here that are unpaid. And I want to make sure that the service that we are doing is not out of, oh, woe is me. I'm giving so many hours. That's martyrdom, and that doesn't serve our center. Is the way we're serving and what we do coming from a space of love? So is there a way that I move into martyrdom and victimhood? So I ask myself these questions. And as I do that, it actually helps my emotions to calm down in that situation. Now, my goal is not necessarily to say what somebody did was right. It doesn't mean that I'm going to condone certain behaviors. My goal is to find where I am one with that person, where I might find a little bit of compassion and connection with that person. Because as I do that, I can move myself into a place of feeling love. And that's the feeling I want to go out into the world and come back to me. I don't want anger and resentment and hatred and fear. If I'm feeling that, that's what I'm creating more of. So I'm taking myself through these steps so I can reach a place of compassion and love, because that's what I want to create more of in the world. Martin Luther King, in this book that I've been sharing with you, Strength to Love, wrote a letter that he modeled off of Corinthians 13 out of the Christian scriptures. And that was a letter written to the Corinthians by Paul. It's the one that I'm sure most of you have heard of, about love. So Martin Luther King wrote his letter modeled off of that, but bringing it into modern time for him. And he says that love is the most durable power in the world. Throughout the centuries, men have sought to discover the highest good. What is the summum bonum of life? I think I have found the answer, America. I have discovered that the highest good is love. This principle is at the center of the cosmos. It is the great unifying force of life. God is love. He who loves has discovered the clue to the meaning of ultimate reality. He who hates stands in immediate candidacy for non-being. American Christians, and that's him talking, you may master the intricacies of the English language, and you may possess the eloquence of articulate speech, but even though you speak with the tongues of men and of angels and have not love, you are like a sounding brass or a tinkling cymbal. You may have the gift of scientific prediction and understand the behavior of molecules. You may break into the storehouse of nature and bring forth many new insights. You may ascend to the height of academic achievement so that you have all knowledge. You may boast of your great institutions of learning and boundless extent of your degrees. But devoid of love, all of these mean absolutely nothing. He goes on with more examples, and he concludes that the greatest of all virtues is love. And so that is what I'm aiming for when I take this stuff into my spiritual practice. Is how can I shift to that place of feeling love? Because that's what I want to bring more of out into the world. So once again, we need to breathe. This is a lot. As I go through that then, and I bring up the mirror and I start to see where some of this stuff is reflected in me, then I know where the healing needs to take place and what we teach. And the question was, what do we teach in regard to all of this? What Ernest Holmes teaches, what we teach in religious science and in New Thought through our other New Thought teachers, is that healing begins within ourself. All healing begins within ourself. When you meet with a practitioner, the practitioner is doing the healing work within themselves for what it is you've presented that they might have begun to see in you. They are looking for that healing work within themselves. Michael Beckwith has been known to say he gets up every morning, has his coffee, and reads the paper to find out what the world's prayer requests are. I would say not only are these the world's prayer requests, they are ours. If something is triggered when we read or see the media, that's where we need to heal. That's our own prayer request in addition to the world's prayer request. That's how we do the healing. We do our healing through that inner work and affirmative prayer. So far what I've been talking about is how do we shift from those feelings of disconnect, fear, anger, powerlessness. That's where a lot of our angst comes from, like I said. How do we shift from that into a place of poise and balance and then move into our power? And our power does come through that healing process of affirmative prayer. It comes from recognizing, as Ernest Holmes also teaches, what we take a stand for as opposed to what we might be against. He says, always take a stand for something and against nothing. So another question I ask myself when I look at something that's blaring at me is, what do I want? In that situation, what do I take a stand for? We often get mesmerized by what we don't want, and our focus ends up over there. The goal is to figure out what do we want. That's where we feel our power. When we focus on what we are taking a stand for in that situation, That's when we move it into prayer and we figure out what we stand for. We also then recognize, and that's one of the stages of our treatment process, we recognize what it is we want, and we recognize through that how it is we move our feet. We always talk about we do our treatment work, our prayer work, and then we move our feet. A lot of us want to start running over here to do something before we do that process. We treat and then move our feet. We don't run out there, move our feet, and then, oh, I better say a prayer about this. Look where I am now, what a mess I'm in, okay? So we treat, we move in, and through that process, we discover what we stand for and how we can move our feet in that positive and creative and uplifting way. So when we do affirmative prayer, are we wielding power over others? Are we making them change? No. The answer is no. No. We are not. We're healing ourselves. We're going within and looking at ourselves, and we're healing ourselves, and we're figuring out where we're led. Several years ago, I took a nutrition class, and I was taught that for every cup of coffee that I drank or every pop that I drank, I needed to drink 2 glasses of water, because coffee and pop are diuretics, and so you need 2 glasses of water to counterbalance 1 cup of those. I think we need the same type of idea when we ingest the media, when we look at what's going on out there, when our buttons get pushed. For every one situation that pushes our buttons, we need 2 positive spiritual practices to balance it out. So for every time that your buttons are pushed, you can move yourself into meditation. You can take yourself through this process of asking those questions. You can read something uplifting for everything that you read that is bringing you down. You can meet with a practitioner. I use the journaling process. I literally ask myself these questions and journal through the answers until I shift my feelings. You can focus on something good while something bad is also out there. And I say 2 goods for every bad. Recently, we've also been hearing in the news the 10-year anniversary of Hurricane Katrina. And what has been interesting to me about that is the stories of the good that was also occurring at that time have started to surface. The good of humanity toward humanity. At the time that it happened 10 years ago, we heard only the bad and the suffering. And so now, slowly, the good is starting to surface. Again, it's where do we put our focus? And that's where we're at choice. So for everything that feels bad or scary or creates anger and fear, 2 goods, 2 spiritual practices, whatever you choose, you can take yourself through that process. And I think as we do that, that's where we find our power. That's where we create with the all creative. And of course, that creative power is creating everything, that which we label good and that which we label bad. Now, I want to note that right here in the center, we have people on both sides of the aisle, as they say. We have people of all different beliefs politically, people that might support different aspects of what's going on out in the world. And within the movement, the diversity is even greater. But what we have that unifies us are these teachings. What we have that unifies us is this belief that we are all one, regardless of our opinions and our beliefs and our political expression in the world. And what we have is the spiritual practice that allows us to bring ourselves back to center, that allows us to bring ourselves back to that place where we can feel love and compassion, and where we can do what we say in our community commitment, where we can treat each other lovingly, gently, and with respect, regardless of all those beliefs and opinions that are out there. And I believe when we do that, we shift our feeling and we create more of that love in the world. We create more of what it is we want to see. And that also allows us to move to a place where we use another tool, and that tool is forgiveness. One of the other questions from the Q&A Sunday is, please address the principle of forgiveness of ourselves and others. Share your experience of this principle. Well, I don't have time today to share my experience of this principle, but I want to again say this magazine, this particular edition, is full of every single article relating to forgiveness. bringing forgiveness into the puzzle, how it works, how we use forgiveness in our practice, in our spiritual lives. And in here, Jesse Jennings, who is one of my favorite authors in this magazine, says, God is not a being like a vast looming parent, but is a state of all being. So again, God's not out there correcting, criticizing, providing forgiveness or not, punishment. It's a state of all being. Jesse continues to say, we begin to forgive when we learn through experience that hanging on to hurt feelings and nursing bitter grudges gets us nowhere, nor does it magically punish or repair the offending other. Human forgiveness doesn't require full restoration of trust in any person or people by whom we've been hurt. It just means we cease hurting ourselves in their name. Yeah. So my goal in my spiritual practice is not necessarily to allow others to hurt me or to move to a place of accepting every type of behavior that's out there. But my goal is to shift my feelings to a place of compassion, love, and feeling that connection with everyone, no matter what their opinion or how they're expressing in the world. So I have one last thing I want to share with you. When I put these talks together, I always envision myself presenting it. I go through it a couple times, and I see myself up here preaching up a storm. I have all this energy, and I'm so excited about what I'm doing. I see myself like Martin Luther King or like RJ, if some of you remember RJ up here. That's how I see myself. And then I look at the video that Randy's made, and I'm standing up here presenting to you like I'm telling you what my breakfast was this morning. So I thought about that, and I realized part of it is because I know it doesn't matter how emphatic I am. It doesn't matter how excited I am. It doesn't matter what I believe. I can't change you. I can't make you take on a spiritual practice. All I can do is take myself through these steps and hold that up as an example, as sometimes good and sometimes I don't make it. You know, I can hold up for you practitioners who can work with you in prayer. I can hold up for you classwork where you can dig into this on a deeper way and figure out how to apply it in your life. I can hold up for you coming here and gathering and interacting and putting into practice when you get into the social hall and you discover your differences of opinion. How do we move to that place of compassion and love? That's all I can do. And I trust you to find your center that is full of peace, poise, and power. And so it is. And so it is.